This one is an introduction to physical geometry, which is a discipline which I have invented, you might say, discovered or composed. Physical geometry is supposed to do two things. It's supposed to combine philosophy, mathematics, and physics into a new discipline. It's supposed to provide a new way of seeing the physical universe, and especially in the terms of its being conceived as space-time, and to provide a strong start towards what Einstein called unified theory. That isn't really a third thing. I wasn't really ready to discuss, and because of my life experience, I have no great hope that anything I do will receive what I would consider to be a reasonable attention in the sorts of places that lead to the full development I'd like them to have. But it was brought out because I became involved in a sort of a cosmological discussion that I couldn't easily escape from. So in this first section of the physical geometry, I want to talk about terms. And the terms are divided into several parts. The first one is dimensions. There's an origin, and the origin in physical geometry is God, who may also be almost anything other than God within certain parameters defined by physical geometry. There's a universe origin, which is the point from which our dominant time radiant begins. And there is a particular origin, and that is the point at which the four dimensions of any spherical system originate and from which they are derived. And there's a fractal origin, which is the point which can be regarded as intrinsic to, which is an origin not regarded than an intrinsic relationship. And there's a relative origin, and then there are the four dimensions of each spherical system. The first is magnitude, and that is the distance on a radiant from an origin, and the relative and determined size and volume of the sphere occurring at that place point. And there is a moment, which is the point in time and progression at which a given set of values exists and operates. And there is latitude, which is one of an infinite set of independent circles of paired length when regarded as lines in a perfect sphere. And there is longitude, which is one of an infinite interlocking set of circles of equal length, sharing 2 points with all other longitudes when regarded as lines in a perfect sphere. The next set of terms is fabricands, and these include time absolute, which is that set of radiants which leave origin defining moments and creating temporality. Time, that radiant along which by definition our universe is arranged. Space absolute, which is those sets of longitudes and latitudes relative to and connecting with all time radiants. Space-time, that's the principal subject of physical geometry in total. Matter, that which is primarily derivative of the criticality of dimension in spiraling a real line across the surface of a sphere, and which is inherently dominant in all latitudes. Energy, that which causes the propagation of all radiance as an inherently restive and present in all latitudes, and is intrinsic in all longitudes. Elements. graviton is one of what may be regarded as an infinite set of rays and line segments proceeding toward the particular origin of any origin in any spherical system. Each graviton is paired with a radiant which tends strongly to be identical to it in length. A radiant is one of what may be regarded as an infinite set of rays and line segments proceeding from the particular origin or any origin in a spherical system. Each radiant is paired with a graviton which tends strongly to be identical in length. Reproductive fracture. A point at which a new spherical system intrinsic to and derivative of the previous particular origin functions as a particular origin. Transmission factor. That system by which new reproductive factors are communicated and established. A natural union is the evident dominant surface of a spherical system. Subordinate union, the evident surfaces of spherical systems which are not dominant. An accidental union, the joint spatial system created by the interplay of multiple spherical systems interacting in a meaningful way. Dimensional spheroid, a spiraling line defining and revealing the dimensional fabric of a system or accidental union. So that's the terminology we will be using in this discipline. I believe that physical geometry, if understood properly, will have an effect on how we see the world around us, how we interact between nations and people, ages and sexes, races, academic disciplines, and also an even larger influence on our ability to cope with the huge universe we are every day discovering more about. It's not unreasonable to ask what simple drawings of apples and lines and illustrations of the shapes of women's bodies, comparing that to the Vitruvian Man, or any of that has to do with the big budget at NASA and the big space agencies of the world. I define outer space as anything farther than the outer atmosphere. Farther from the center of the earth than the upper atmosphere of the earth. In other words, while we live our lives in some place other than outer space, almost everything we see and experience as a species in terms of space is outer space. 99.9%. I founded a group on Facebook which confidently predicted water in the craters on the moon and an abundance of planets before the Lunar Project and the Kepler Project proved them. Bueno, hola amigo, ¿cómo te llamas?
Rodolfo Silva Martínez.
¿Y de dónde viene?
De Saltillo, Coahuila.
¿Y cuántos años tiene?
Tengo 23 años.
Y yo 45, por eso tiene más chance de hacer nuevas cosas que yo. ¿Y qué era su materia en la universidad?
Estudié ingeniería civil en la Universidad Autónoma de Coahuila.
Y te has unido a un grupo mío en el Facebook. ¿Y qué te interesa eso?
Claro que sí, es un tema muy interesante que creo que tiene mucho.
¿Y piensas que todo el mundo puede tener esperanzas de participar en el desarrollo del espacio o solamente en los 2 o 3 países?
No, claro, todo el mundo es una oportunidad para todos los países.
¿Y es la herencia de la humanidad o de rusos y americanos?
Es de la humanidad.
Bueno, muchas gracias, hermano.
Okay, gracias.
Space-time is not something we can safely leave to be understood by astrophysicists and those few best journalists who follow them. The new and expanding view of space-time provided by our space exploration and astronomy fills our minds and popular culture with spaceships and aliens and all sorts of art, provides the music of the cosmos. But that music of the cosmos, that aspirational view of the heavens, is only part of our practical lives, where space defines the measurements made by carpenters and engineers and factory hands, by housewives and people driving through traffic each and every day. There is no great divide between the two. The time I spent in the Crater Cap Colony Concept group on Facebook was only one of many experiences I've had of the idea of moving things through space and making a home. And I think that we have to reclaim that connection. We have to reclaim the universality of life and its demands, the ties of the great expanses of space to our personal lives. If there is another video in this series, it'll have to attempt to really break down how latitude and longitude, magnitude and moment work in a spherical system, have to show how they are fractal and how all this works and why it matters in our larger universe of things to think about and do. But I want to spend a little time going over the implications in very general terms by asserting them. So this is it. Number one, sphericality is a powerful and universal principle. It is falsely simplistic to ascribe only to the forces previously mapped and described by physics the sphericality of things like soap bubbles, foam on the seas, stars all along the main sequence of stellar development, planets, moons, biological entities, and plenty and countless other vastly differing things, including cycles and circles in time, which we will talk about in the human calendar, and the experience of consciousness and other things. Secondly, sphericality joins mathematics to physics because it ties two aspects of the same universe together, which these disciplines describe differently. That'll be a challenging thing to look at. Now, something very specific. The Mandelbrot Set, which is a sort of computer program by a late great designer scientist, is a set of mathematical values that illustrates but does not explain the basic fact that sphericality is intrinsically fractal. Fourth, sphericality proves that space-time is intrinsically lawful, rich, and complex once the question is properly addressed. Once we see this principle in space-time, we see space-time as vastly different than this great random nothingness that we have often presumed it to be. Sphericality, fifth, is well established as the law of the universe. Once it is established, then it is overwhelmingly likely that what time is what sphericality generates as a radiant, as defined by physical geometry. These are the basic concepts that we will look to first in understanding the implications of this new science.